Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this presentation this afternoon. My name's Steve. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that in a second, but you're here today to hear about how to impress a partner at your interview. So let's dig into this and go ahead. So, as I said, my name's Steve, and I am the branding man. So a little bit of detail about me and where I've come from. So I am an influential careers specialist with a passion for inclusion and diversity in the workplace. I'm also a mentor and coach to a growing group of recruitment professionals and other younger business founders. I host my own career podcast called My Career Story, where I interview guests every Monday about their careers, the moments that have mattered to them, moments of pride, moments of joy, moments where they've fallen flat on their face, moments where they've had regret, what they're looking forward to in the future. So you can go and check that out as well. And the reason that I'm talking to you today and that I wanted to be able to share and help you with your quest to find a role potentially with one of the big accountancy firms is that I've got 12 years of experience working in student recruitment and employer branding, and 8 of those years were spent working at EY, often closely with senior leaders and partners at the firm, which is why I've chosen to talk about how to be successful at your partner interview. I spent a lot of time with partners at the firm, getting feedback from them from candidate interviews that they've been doing, but also spending time just in between events, moving between locations when we're doing milk rounds and things, and learning more about them, their motivations of why they joined firms, what they find important when they're speaking to candidates. So what I wanted to be able to do is to share that with you today. The work that I do focuses with young people focuses around career mentoring, so I'm just going to quickly cover that off. So I like to be really focused on making the most out of people's unique perspectives, going back to that piece around inclusion and diversity, their talents and experiences. So I offer one-to-one and group mentoring, CV searches and interview prep, and work around creating and managing your brand story, some of which is covered in the podcast itself. So do, as I say, go and have a look at that. But back to today. So we're going to think about how to impress a partner at your interview. So we're going to do this in 3 stages. We're going to look at what you want from your career and why that's important. We're going to look at what they want from you. We're going to look at why it's important to show an interest in them and their career. And we're also going to look at the importance of building your brand story. So let's kick off with knowing what you want. So you've got a picture of a purple cow on the screen right now, and you might be thinking, why on earth is there a picture of a purple cow on the screen? And it's to come from this book from an author called Seth Godin. Now, he's a marketing and branding guru who I follow very passionately and was part of the reason that I got into my career that I did. And essentially, his book, The Purple Cow, is really about understanding yourself and understanding really kind of what you want from your career. And that was something, if I look back in my own career journey, that I didn't really know until I joined EY back in 2010. I would like to call it my kind of which career, no idea syndrome. And the reason that I think it's really important when you're talking to partners at an interview, that you're confident about what you want and who you are, is that partners want to get to know you. That's why they interview candidates. That's why they get involved in the process. And the feedback that I've had from partners when I've been speaking to them in the past is that it's very obvious sometimes if a candidate lacks a little bit of confidence, maybe doesn't really know who they are, has maybe just scattergunned in their approach of doing applications, and has really kind of not for want of better words that may have said in the past, kind of not really put the effort in that they would have expected when they've got through to the final stage of an interview. That can be really difficult if you don't know what you want. And so what I want to take you through is just some ideas of how you might be able to tackle that if it's something that you're worried about at the moment or something that you're wanting to improve on. Let's dive into that knowing what you want piece to start with. So essentially for me, it's thinking about what is your why. So there's a fantastic book. I'm a bit of a bookworm, as you might be picking up already, by Simon Sinek. So I've actually got a copy of the book here. But It's a book focusing on Start With Why. So some of you may have seen this. There's a great TEDx video that Simon's got if you wanted to go and have a look at that to explore in a bit more detail after today's presentation. But essentially, I'm talking about this because it's really important that we understand our values when we're looking at applying for a job. And that piece that every single interviewer will always ask you, and I've asked it myself because I do interview work with employers too in the student market, is the why us question. Now, surprisingly, that's one question that a lot of candidates can't answer. And so there's a need to focus on that essentially. And so for me, a really good way of doing that is by focusing on your values. So you might be thinking kind of, what does a value mean? What does it look like? So if I give you some examples of some of the values that I find are important that have helped me with my career path and the way that I've approached interviews, particularly at a final stage, like as in a partner interview. I really cherish authenticity as a value. So being real, being upfront and being yourself. I also really value connection as well. So that interaction with another person, being inquisitive, being curious is part of that as well. So the work that I look for always needs to involve an element of that as well. And there's also kind of an element of a little bit of kind of risk taking with me as well in terms of value, like being able to push boundaries, being able to do new things, being able to think innovatively that drives the work that I do. So that's always kind of acted as a guiding star for me and helped me to think about how I approach the world of work and the job interviews that I'm going to end up to. So the way that you can do that is to think about how you would differentiate their why. So you're going to be learning so much over the next couple of days about employers and about the different work that they do in the accountancy space. But I would say if you take the model that Simon uses, for example, you look at the what they do. They all work in professional services as a simplification. They all kind of have the same way of doing it. So they will all have very different, very similar service lines, offering advice to their clients. And so what that means is that if you're focusing on your why, that's your differentiator, that's your purple cow. And so if you explain a bit more about this purple cow concept. So a purple cow is essentially the idea that if you drive past a field and there's a load of cows in it, and one of them's purple, that you're going to be a bit more kind of intrigued about them. You're going to think, what is it different about that cow that's in that field? What does it have that other people don't have? Why would I want to kind of use that purple cow for something potentially? And so that's what you want to be kind of influencing with a partner, is getting them to think about kind of, why is this person interviewing for this job? What could they add to my business? When you've got that opportunity to be really aware of your values and a company's why, so their purple cow, it gives you a good opportunity to align the two. So a lot of organizations, for example, have got a purpose that they're talking about. So it would be good advice for you to spend some time looking at their careers website and trying to figure out what it is that their purpose is. Most of them will be very kind of obvious. They will talk about it. They will have videos, particularly for a lot of the big professional services firms. They're global organizations. So there's a lot of content out there that you can benefit from looking around. So take that time to look around. Take that intuition and put the work in. It will do you a lot of good in the interview. It will give you an opportunity to talk about the work that they're doing, about the reasons that you've joined an organization, and essentially helps you to answer that "why did you apply here" question. As an interviewer, I'm always really disappointed when I meet a candidate that can't answer the why question. Also talking to kind of what an interviewer might be looking for, especially if it's a partner, is the idea that if we think about what's going on in the world right now, there's a lot that's changing. It's happening fast. And so essentially, Simon's also written a book here, which might be worth looking at or doing some reading around. If you Google this, you'll find some articles that are there for free if you don't want to go out and read the book. But essentially what partners are also looking for around that why you're joining an organization is your ability to be able to take on change and transformation and to own that. So Simon here talks a lot about infinite mindsets. So infinite mindsets are about when you how do I put it? You expect surprises, you revel in them, and you're prepared to be transformed by them. And leaders who embrace that infinite mindset in stark contrast to others, because they can actually build stronger, more innovative, more inspiring organizations. And their people tend to trust each other more. You might have worked with leaders that were visionaries in the past, and you've kind of gone along with them on the journey. You felt that they were an authority on the subject, and you've been able to go along with them. And they've also developed a resilience. Partners at the moment, as you might imagine, when you get through to an interview with them, they're going to have a lot on their mind. They are bought into an organization. They are having to make people redundant. They're having to make choices that will change the structure of their organization. They might be also working from home at this point, if it's a virtual partner interview, which it may be. Do take that into account. And so they're going to be have a lot on their mind. And so the more that you can do to show that you're the kind of person that likes to take on responsibility and is almost fearful of change, the better. It'll give you that ability to show that you know what you're talking about. And there's a piece that's within this book here around infinite mindset, which is really important, which is around finding your just cause. So if you can become or imagine that you're the sort of type of person that has a specific vision, it might be a little bit out there, but it's so appealing that people are willing to make sacrifices and follow you. That's the kind of person that a partner is going to be looking for, because essentially a partner interviewing a student nowadays is looking for somebody that's going to be sitting in their seat in the future. So you need to show that you're ready to be that person. Second thing that we're looking at is knowing why they want what they want. So what do I mean by that? So it's essentially thinking about kind of how to do your research. Got a little bit of a crass image here, potentially, but of a plant growing out of a pot of money. But at the end of the day, every business, especially at the moment, is focusing quite heavily on their bottom line. And so you need to be able to show that you are able to have a solid business acumen, that you understand the economy, both in the past, in the present, and in the future. So you need to be able to make causation and links between the cause and effect of things happening. So maybe spend some time as part of your preparation thinking about how you can do some research into how a recession in the past has affected the economy. Because there's a lot indicating at the moment that we could potentially be going into a recession. And so if you're able to show that you're aware of the challenges that are coming for a business, a partner will be very impressed by that. And in the same way, think about the future as well. So there may be businesses right now that are pivoting quite fast. And so by pivoting, I mean are focusing on changing the direction that their business might be going in, revisiting their strategy, looking at a different way of doing things. And so with that, it's really helpful if you can show how recessions have been advantageous in the past for businesses, or how they've led to businesses closing, so that they can appreciate that you know what you're talking about, and that you're the kind of person that they could put in front of a client. That essentially means that you're good at spotting opportunities for business growth. Now, some of the ways that I think you can do this. So I would suggest using the FT as a business overview. You can do that in two ways. So you can think about how you're tracking over time, and you can think about how you're working over the day as well, on the day. So let's look at tracking over time. So tracking over time. So using the FT as a business review, business overview. So when we were able to go into offices, and I know that, say, for example, a lot of the big professional services firms at the moment are starting to open up their doors again, and that we're being invited back in. But if you do get the opportunity to go into an office for your interview with a partner, I'd use that as an opportunity in the foyer to pick up a copy of the FT. Why the FT? It's read by a lot of people that work in business, and it's seen as the business authority. in terms of information. What you can be doing when you're tracking over time is using the FT website. Now, I recognise that as students, you might be working on very limited budgets, and that inviting you to spend money on investing into a subscription for the FT might be a stretch. I've done it myself this week. You can do a 4-week trial at the moment for £1. Now, I think £1 is an excellent return on the information that you can get from the FT to help you with your jobs and the way that you're going to approach that partner interview. On the FT site, you've got opportunities to learn more about professional services on the website. You can do research on UK companies and track that over time and be reading each day about what's going on in the UK. And you can also be thinking about the companies individually. There's a search bar. You can just pop the name of the organisation that you're looking to join, and you'll get information and alerts sent to you around that company. It's really good that information that you can be throwing into an interview. It shows that you're knowledgeable, shows that you know what's going on, and it makes people feel confident. If you do know the clients that an organisation that you're looking to apply to might be working with, sometimes they don't share them with professional services because of the client confidentiality that goes on within accounting, which is fine. But where they do, and some of them are starting to maybe track some of their clients and be able to talk about the challenges that their clients are facing, as well as their business, to show extra business acumen. If you haven't been able to do that, and you find yourself running out of time and it's on the day of your interview or the day before, 2 things that you can do is to look at the headlines and also to look at something called the Lex. Now, the Lex is the oldest and most influential business and finance column of its kind. It highlights key risks and opportunities, and it's really good for investment opportunities. So this is where partners look every single day for information to help their businesses grow. So if you can see things that are happening there and you're able to comment on them in your partner interview, you're going to really stand out. If you're not interested in looking at the FT, it's quite a dense document and you're not sure whether or not you want to spend time on it, you can be looking at Accountancy Age. So they have 2 areas. So one of them is a company news section that gives you highlights of everything that's going on with all of the accountancy firms. And I also noticed when I was doing some research yesterday as well, they currently have a series of webinars that are going on, live discussions. Again, that gives you some thought leadership of what's going on in accountancy. The ICAW, another great area, one of the awarding bodies for accountants, and this is who I worked with quite closely when I was at EY as well, have recently updated their website, and they've got a great insights section. So within that, there's viewpoints, there's interviews, there's features, there's analysis. There's loads of information there that you can be using to learn more about accountancy in real time. And similarly, the Institute of Chartered Accountants in Scotland, ICAS, have got an area on their website that focuses on some of the key topics around accountancy, which I thought was interesting, that partners will find interesting too. So ideas around technology, around trust, around data, around the regulation that's happening in the industry as well, is a really good way of you being able to show that you know what you're talking about. Okay, so that's the second one. The third one I think you should be focusing on is showing an interest in the partner. So what do I mean by that? So most interviews, I've done this again myself as well, but definitely at partner level, will have something where they will end the interview. They'll say, do you have anything that you would like to ask me? Feedback that I have always given about candidates and that has been given to me from partners in the past is that they're amazed at the number of young people that don't take up the opportunity to ask a question here, or that they get it wrong. One thing I would say do not ask at this point is, how much am I going to get paid? It cuts through everything that you just worked so hard to show them that you're interested in their business, that you know what you're talking about, that you're somebody that can be relied on, somebody that can be trusted, and it kind of almost takes away the shine from you and makes it look like you're just applying to something because you want to know how much money you're going to get. Businesses can see through that, and I would advise you to avoid that. Some questions that you can ask. Tell me a bit more about yourself. I ask this question all the time to people if I've just met them. It helps people feel relaxed. Going back to that authenticity piece that I value, it really allows them to open up and to share bits about themselves and that they want to share. It also might give you an idea of kind of how they've got to where they are within the business, what challenges they've faced, how the business has supported them. If not, follow up with questions such as, what do you enjoy about working at X organisation? What are the most challenging parts of working in X organisation? And a good question to ask as well, which again goes back to that piece around business acumen, tracking over time, and showing a partner that you know what you're talking about, is being able to ask somebody about where they see their business in 3 years' time. So those are the 3 points. So what I'm going to move on to now, before I just summarise, is, because we've got some time for questions as well today, is looking at building your brand story. What do I mean by that? So I do a lot of work in personal branding and focusing on how we can make sure that we are representing ourselves and that we're making the most of the opportunities in front of us. And one of them that I do, one of the ways that I do this is through LinkedIn. So I wanted to share some helpful tips for you. Why am I talking about this though when we're talking about a partner interview? One of the pieces of feedback that I've had in the past from partners and that I've seen is candidates adding partners on LinkedIn with no introduction, having not met them, and partners being overwhelmed with kind of connection requests there and not knowing who they should respond to, who they should say yes to, why they should say yes to them, and just leaving them sitting there. Conversations I have had with them personally is that if you leave people sitting there, they think that you're just ignoring them, which they appreciate. But they say that they find it hard and that their time is precious, and they are also curating their feed in the same way that you may be on social media. So it's really important for you to be thinking about how you make that connection request. I would advise, and I'll come back to this at the end of these tips here, to make sure that you send those connection requests after your partner interview and once you know their name, but also after you may have been either rejected or offered a job. You may say, well, why would I send a connection request to somebody when I've been rejected from a job? They may still be a great connection to have in the future. And I will always kind of say that rejection in the job interview process is a really good learning opportunity, and it will show great strength in character if you still send that connection request to the partner if you're interested in doing so. What I will say though is that you don't have to send a connection request, so don't feel worried if you're kind of the person who doesn't want to do this. I'm not saying you have to do this. This is just one of the ways that I think you can impress a partner. You want the partner to be impressed though, if they've made you a job offer, because they can see your professional brand and how much effort you've put into that you're sharing your story with your connections, that you have got valuable work experience that you can speak to, that you're an authority, and that you can have a trustful conversation with people. I always think about, especially when you're in a partner interview, you may as a student have limited work experience, and a lot of partners now appreciate that. But what the flip side of that is that you need to be thinking about experiences of work as well as valuable work experience. So volunteering that you've had and drawing on those examples when you're in a partner interview is a good way of doing that, as well as showcasing them on LinkedIn, for example. Do request endorsements to reinforce your story from people that you've worked with in the past, and ask them to be specific about what you did with them, the impact that you had, the value that you drove, is the only thing that I would say with that. Sometimes when we leave people to write an endorsement for themselves, they may say things that we don't want them to say, positively or negatively. And this isn't about telling them what to say, it's giving them some guidelines. With accountancy as well, all of the companies that you would be applying to will have pages on LinkedIn. So do follow those companies that you're interested in too. and use it as an opportunity to engage with their content, comment, introduce connections along the way, tagging people and showing people that you care, that you've got an interest, and bringing that why that you've spent some time thinking about to life. And as I said, do think about connecting if you want to, it's not compulsory, but connect to add value or to continue an existing conversation after meeting somebody. Do use that opportunity to add a note as an introduction, so that you can jog people's memory, be more familiar. Everybody's different on LinkedIn, but a lot of partners, as I said, they're busy and they don't necessarily want to be inundated with connection requests that they don't necessarily see as being valuable to them, or actually that whether or not they know the person. So we've gone through how to impress a partner at your interview, in terms of knowing what you want from your career, knowing what they want from you, showing an interest in them and their career, and the importance of building your brand story. Okay, so I would say 3 simple ways to remember this. It's about you, it's about they, it's about them. Okay, so we've got time for questions now. So if anybody does have any questions, then please do let us know.
And that's my cue. Oh, I believe so. Steve has I've just lost him from my one, so hopefully he can just come back on. So if anyone's there, he's just getting ready for the Q&A. Got some great questions for him right here. So I guess he's probably just come off maybe signal. So hopefully he'll be able to come back on. If there are any more, so you've got an opportunity now to ask Steve. We've probably about 15 minutes. Please just pop them in here. So into the chat function, that would be brilliant. Things like values. I've got some really great questions to ask him about what inspired him. Hello, can you hear me?
I can.
I mean, you're just waiting for my arrival, aren't you, Steve? Is this what's happened?
That might be better now. Is that better?
Yeah, that's better. Brilliant.
One way
Right.
how not to impress a partner at interview is showing that you don't know how to use the technology that you've been shown.
I love that. Clearly there was something with me coming in that just made your video go. So now we're back, we're aligned. Thank you so much. I loved loads of that content, obviously. So I know Steve for people in the audience, so I'm really excited by a lot of the content that he talks about, a lot of things about Simon Sinek's book, the why, the purple cow, all of that stuff. It's really, really great things to just familiarise yourself. Oh, look at that. Got the books ready to go. So I've got a few questions that I'll just launch into. And then, as I mentioned, if anyone else wants to put some on there, then please do. So the first one then that actually came in on the chat. So Steve, what advice would you give to current uni students on how to make the most of their remaining time at uni?
So how much remaining time roughly? Did you say until the end of the year, or just generally whilst they're there?
Yeah, generally whilst they're there. So yeah, if they're like, let's say they're second year, and like what can they do to really make the most of it?
I mean, I feel like, and I can speak to 2 kind of sides here. So I'll speak to my experience when I was at university, because I went to uni in Durham, albeit 20 years ago. But also as well, kind of from my experience in student recruitment. So just my own experiences. I think one of the things that I found really useful when I was there, and I was at the point in my second year where I was having to start thinking a bit more seriously about my future, and part of my career story is I hadn't really put much effort in until that point, was that actually I started saying yes to a lot of things that I'd always said no to. And I don't mean that in kind of saying yes to everything sense, but I mean being quite strategical and thinking, okay, well, do you know what? Like, I'm uncomfortable at doing X, and somebody's just asked me to do it, so I'm going to give it a go. so for example, I had identified that I didn't really have a huge amount of work experience. So where I grew up, where I am today, like, is a tiny little village. So I didn't really have that access to work experience that a lot of people had, that I went to university with, either through networks that they had or the fact that they lived in a big city. So making use of that remaining time for me as well was about getting involved in university life. I'd been quite passive until that point, and I think if potentially the person that's asking that question, or anybody that's watching, knows that they could be doing more, use that time to actually start doing more. Join some committees, run for leadership positions if you're interested in doing that, do some volunteering. But also as well, do you know what, like, we have a lot of time on our hands at the moment, also as well, and the world is very different to what it was when I was at university. Now there's so much that you can get access to for free online. It goes back to that piece I was saying about the FT. Like, there's a slight difference because it's £1 to join the FT for a month, but something like LinkedIn, you can join for 25 quid, I think it is, a month or something, to take your profile up to premium. LinkedIn Learning hub in there where you can go and learn different skills and upskill yourself. The time that you've got to be building that business acumen in different ways. So you don't necessarily always have to be knowledgeable about the business. It's also really useful to be knowledgeable about yourself, and it helps you with that self-discovery piece.
Yeah.
And people are asking you those questions of why you've got something to back it up with. It doesn't necessarily always have to be because I did 6 weeks of work experience in a corporate environment and slayed
it. Great advice. Love that. And yeah, we've had quite a few come through actually while we've just been talking about that. This is a great question for you, Steve. I love this. So what's a piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
How long have you got?
Great question, whoever asked that one.
A piece of advice I would give myself, and I'm going to say this for a couple of reasons, because of what's happening kind of like in the world outside and what's coming up in the next kind of few days or so. So on Saturday we've got World Mental Health Day, and on Monday we've got National Coming Out Day. Like, there's things in that kind of I would give my younger self advice along the lines of talking. And if I'm struggling, I don't know what I'm doing. Part of the reason that it took me until 2010 to walk in the door at EY and find the career that led me to this conversation today was that I'm not very good. I'm still not very good at it in some ways, but like, I don't like to ask for help. I've always seen it as being a weakness. What I've learned is that it's not. So I think the advice I would give my younger self is, if you're not sure, ask. And if you've got something to say it, because it doesn't help you bottling things up. Yeah.
Very, very good advice. I think a lot of people are very aware of that. They try to do things and then actually just shout for help. Actually, you get much further and you get a lot of support. So I love that piece of advice. Really good. You did well there. I mean, pleasure. So this is a great one that links to it. So Beth has asked, is there any common things that you've experienced from interviewing that are definite thing to avoid?
Yes, I have, and I'm going to give you some advice now relating to this medium, because a lot of employers are using virtual as a way to interview now, and it's something that me as an interviewer, I as an interviewer has found hard to adapt to at times, but also that I think students sometimes overlook. Simple things like the background behind you. You're inviting somebody into your space, like, make it look tidy. I hope it looks tidy. Probably if I moved it to one side, you could see you might say something else. But if I logged on, for example, I had some clothes hanging on that wardrobe. And I'll take those down. Like, just be aware of your surroundings. Be mindful that your camera's on throughout. I have actually had a student in the last 3 months during lockdown that was throwing popcorn up into the air and catching it in their mouth whilst they were talking in an interview.
Oh no.
Clearly the camera was there and we're just having kind of a party by themselves at home, which is fine, but I was looking and kind of going, what are you doing?
Yeah, big no.
and be kind of like, be as present as you can. It is very difficult. The medium of interviewing on a camera is quite draining. I'm even finding it quite draining now. Of kind of like, you are constantly on looking at the right place, pretending that that little light or whatever it is that you've got as your camera is a pair of eyes, is a real way of maintaining eye contact without actually being in the room.
Yeah, really good advice. And this question links to it as well. So a lot of students here will be looking to apply or have applied and been rejected. And I know a big thing that we always talk about is around sort of mindset, positive mindset, and really getting over those things. And it's so hard when sometimes the rejection that you face, especially if you're going for these jobs, it might be one of the first big rejections you've had. So it'd be great just to hear, what advice would you give to someone who's been rejected? How do they kind of get over that?
That's a really good question. Rejection's really hard at the moment because, I mean, in a way it's easy because we're all being rejected in so many different ways at the moment. When you look at the world of work, kind of like, try as hard as it is to take rejection as a sign that it wasn't meant to be. But also be honest with yourself. Have a bit of a debrief of your own and think kind of like, what did I do and didn't I do that might have led to that rejection? Don't overthink it. I know I'm a bit of I can overthink things, and spiraling's not good, but do take that time to be honest with yourself, center yourself and be like, right, okay, well, I can see why that person rejected me. It's hard when you're a student and you're applying to graduate jobs as well. I mean, we used to get thousands and thousands of applications for our graduate and apprenticeship programs when I was back at EY, and you can't respond to every single person. You can't tell every single person why they didn't get the job. So just take it as a sign that you weren't the right fit, or you didn't put the work in, and be honest with yourself in both scenarios. I think with rejection, there is value in knowing that it's not right for you, and that's giving you a steer in a different direction and an opportunity for you to actually go, I'm going to look at something else. With accountancy specifically as well, Lizzie, I would say that a lot of the ground fairs that I used to go along to, it was always interesting. You'd set the room up with the 4 different service lines, and everybody would come in and ask where consulting was and go straight for consulting, or they'd ask where accountancy was and go for accountancy. And the corporate finance, and particularly the tax teams, would get left stood with nobody talking to them. And it was when they actually went round the room, the feedback that you get at the end of the night from the students was a lot of penny drop moments of, do you know what, I'd never really thought of working in tax, but I'm actually probably suited to it. And that rejection piece, sometimes if you do that work up front and you do the research, you might actually have a better chance of joining the organisation that you want to join, but just in a different way. Allows you to kind of bypass that rejection piece because you've actually done. That's why I was talking about values and knowing about your why and everything. It helps you to give you that steer on it. So that if things go wrong, they go wrong. Just like take stock and move on. I will say now, and again, it's something I've had to learn myself that I've probably not been very good at in the past.
Yeah, and I guess it's all about having an open mind, as you just said there, that sometimes people, you can just think that you want to go and do something, and that's fine, but actually have an open mind if there's other things that you potentially might want to do. So that's really, really, really interesting, really useful. So on that, the values that you mentioned, so I love the why, as I mentioned before. So I picked out a few here, so double check me. So authenticity, connection, risk taking. Love them. And I think this is such an interesting kind of question because there's a lot of firms who have the why and the core values. And I guess a big question is students thinking about their why and what they want and why they choose that company. So what I just wanted to ask you is, how did you find out that they were your core values? Like, what was your journey to find them?
Gosh, I'm going to go again. So if I go quickly through each of them. So authenticity was something that I've developed over time. The word authenticity is quite a buzzword, and it has been for a good number of years. And I think sometimes people are in danger of sharing things and sharing too much because they think that's authenticity. That's not authenticity. That's probably oversharing and not realizing boundaries sometimes, if I'm honest. Authenticity is about being confident in yourself and almost kind of worrying less about the fact that if you fall over and make a mistake and everybody's watching, that's okay. Probably that's that piece about rejection as well. As actually that quote, there's a quote in that frame behind me that's from Brené Brown around daring greatly and being in this arena and stuff. And so that's where authenticity comes from. The connection bit, you know me well, you've known me for years. I'm probably doing it right now. I can talk for England. And so I'm nosy. I like to know about people. So for me, it's a value, and it's a two-way. Connection is about a two-way thing, and it's why I call myself the chief heart officer for the branding man as well. Is that it's about getting to know somebody and understanding them. So that's why I've got connection there. And then risk taking, again, something that's developed over time. With risk taking, that, and as particularly at the moment, things don't move forward unless you push yourself outside your comfort zone. And that moment, it goes back to that first question that you had there, actually, about making the most use of the time that you've got left at university. You're only going to be at university for so long. So start taking some risks in a safe space, because that's what university was for me. It was that opportunity to try things without there being accountability in some ways of me or risking my career or anything like that. So that's where they've come from.
Brilliant, really insightful, love it. So there's just one more here I think we've got. So this is a great one from Jared. So I'm involved in societies and the running of them at uni. How can I use this positively in the application process?
Involved in a society specific, what was it? Something specific about society, or just in general?
I think so. I'll read it again so we can try and determine it. So I'm involved in societies and the running of them. So basically he's running societies, is involved in them. How can you use this positively in the application process?
Societies are about, for me, they're about having an impact. So be able to show what you did. Don't just join a society because you think it's going to be a good way for you to spend time and it'll look good on your CV or your application. Have a reason for joining it. That goes back to your why and your values. Is there something that you want to achieve and you want to say, I've done this as a result of being in that society, is what you should be thinking about first. Don't scattergun and join every single society either as well. You'll never go to them all. You'll never spend enough time building relationships. Goes back to, again, for me, that connection piece. Pick one or two and do them really well, and be able to use simple things like your star model for interviews and things, of being able to say, I was in this situation, I was given this task, I took this action, and this was the result. Always come back to why you did it and how you made an impact, because a partner especially is going to be sitting there and thinking, are they just full of rubbish or are they actually genuine? Did they do something?
And I guess it all comes down to the passion as well. A lot of this is underpinned by you showing, not just being able to talk about things, but actually showing that you really have a passion for it.
Exactly.
Love that. So final question, Steve.
Okay.
Final one. So I'm going to try and make it a good one. The purple cow. So I do love that analogy, because it's about how do you stand out. So do you have any final top tips for how students who are listening can be more of the purple cow?
It's simple. It's kind of a simple one. It goes back to that Oscar Wilde quote stuff, but just kind of like, be yourself. Everyone's taken, but just be yourself, and because that's how you're going to feel like you belong in the workplace. That's how people are going to connect with you, and that's how a partner is going to look at you and go, you intrigue me, I'm curious, you've done a lot of stuff, you could add some value, you're going to take this business places that I could never take it. And you're not going to get that across in an interview if you're trying to be somebody else. You're going to be trying too hard to fit a particular box or tick some certain boxes or be able to say you've done X, Y, Z. Be yourself. And again, speaking back to that rejection piece, if you get rejected as part of the process, it's not because you were yourself. that's part of you knowing that that wasn't the right place for you because you were authentic.
Great advice. Well, thank you so much, Steve. Lots of amazing things and lots of different kind of takeaways for what we've heard from other employers. So hopefully this really gives you advice on how to be more rounded and authentic in your interviews, because we all want you to get them. So thank you so much, Steve. On that, I will say goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.